The next goal of the plan is to plan for climate change and energy use in a manner that minimizes the impact to public health and the environment. We have a pretty unique environment around here, a highly desirable coastal area, and we've certainly seen that degrade over time, and that's a challenge and an issue that we need to take seriously and evaluate. Next goal is support, value, and enhance the region's unique communities. We certainly have efforts that undertake that now with the government entities that are involved. The Seagate Neighborhood Plan is an example from the City of Wilmington, a small area plan that takes a look at a specific community rather than just looking at the city as a whole, getting in there, getting into a community and evaluating what that community's needs are and how to plan that community accordingly through different policies and regulations. Another goal is to increase the region's transportation and housing options and lower these costs. I have some statistics in a moment that I'll show you that are pretty staggering, that were pretty staggering to me, at least when we went through the application process. Just some of the burden that our region's residents have as far as housing and transportation costs, particularly as a percent of their income. And finally, create the framework for collaboration to meet the region's common goals. As mentioned earlier, collaboration and regional planning efforts have been minimal, and we have a challenging environment to work in, and we really need to create the framework to collaborate and have a common goal to rally around. So some of the issues that we'll specifically be looking at in our plan are vulnerability to sea level rise and increased coastal storms, sprawling patterns of land use development. Our economy is largely dependent on tourism and heavy industry. We have a pretty substantial lack of affordable housing, limited transportation choices, and a need for a regional plan for sustainability. Talking about our vulnerability to sea level rise, this is kind of a hot topic, and depending on where you stand on it, I'm not sure if you would agree or disagree, but the science is certainly out there and we need to be prepared for it. We have a lot of significant development in our coastal areas that are potentially going to be impacted as sea level rises and coastal storms increase in their intensity and frequency. We have a lot of valuable wetlands that provide significant flood and pollution mitigation. These wetlands are prone to impact and impairment from development pressure. Our water supply is at risk from saltwater intrusion. As our population grows, our water supply is going to become increasingly taxed in concert with potential impacts from sea level rise. We have a pretty tremendous problem there. Finally, tourism is a strong economic driver for our region, and that certainly can be compromised by threats to our coastal areas such as the diminishing water quality and storms of increasing frequency and intensity. As far as our land use development, we haven't really had a lot of long-range planning in the region, so that has really created some challenges for us. We have a challenged transportation network. We've lost a lot of unique environmental habitat areas. We've had impairments and loss of wetlands, increased stormwater runoff, and that goes hand in hand with declining surface water quality. We have loss of land once utilized for agriculture, and a lot of conflicting land uses. Touching on the economy again, we're really largely dependent on tourism and heavy industry. Heavy industry and unbridled development really contribute to environmental degradation, and that can impair our tourism economic driver. Sea level rise again can impact our tourism. We need to start looking at other ways that we can drive our economy aside from heavy industry and tourism. These statistics kind of show how service-based our industry is. 58% of our jobs pay less than $16 an hour. And then compare that to what it really takes to bring home the bacon, so to speak, for a family of four. You're looking a significant difference there, which puts our residents at quite a burden. We have a lack of affordable housing in our region. The region's increase in real estate values has outpaced our increase in income. That puts a burden on our region's residents with exacerbated housing costs, particularly as a percent of income. Lower cost housing is typically distant from major employment centers and commerce nodes. In concert with limited public transportation options, this really increases the reliance on personal automobiles as a necessary mode of transportation, and this subsequently increases transportation costs as well as vehicle miles traveled, which translates into more emissions being put out into our region. Unlimited transportation choices. Again, we're really an automobile dependent region, and that has been kind of created from falling land use patterns and the geographical and environmental constraints that we've had. We have an inefficient street and road network. Again, people looking for more affordable housing have had to find that further away from major employment centers and commerce nodes, so that increases their transportation costs. They have to drive more to get to where they're going, so they have to pay more to drive more. And finally, our transportation improvement projects are really focused on moving vehicles more quickly. So our focus is improving our streets, improving our roads, not really focusing on getting vehicles off the road and subsidizing alternative transportation. And finally, we really need to have a regional plan for our area. We have a lot of conflicting agendas, a lot of competing needs, precarious political environments. All these have created challenges for us for collaboration and coordinated planning efforts. Cross-jurisdictional coordination has been limited and really partially successful. And to date, there really hasn't been an effort undertaken like what we're about to embark on. I'd like to go over a little bit about how we're going to create this plan. We got about 7 steps. This is a 3-year process that we're looking at. The implementation of this will go beyond 3 years. We'll have some benchmarks and some metrics to evaluate our success, but just talking about how we're going to get to that point. First, we got to set the foundation. That's where we are today. We're just finalizing our contract with HUD. What we'll be doing in the near future is contracting a program director and project manager. They will be the 2 personnel that we're going to hire to kind of facilitate this planning effort, and they will be crucial to the coordination for this effort. We'll develop a public engagement plan, develop a website, do some data reconnaissance, and develop a data management plan. And finally, we'll establish a regional advisory committee and a technical advisory committee. These 2 committees will really be tasked with doing the education and outreach, doing the collaboration, getting the opinions in for what the issues are in this region and how do we overcome them. Where I could see something like the EDC fitting in is in the technical advisory committee, which is going to be composed of our educational institutions, transportation organizations, housing organizations, economic development organizations, healthy community and community outreach organizations, social and equity organizations, and environmental organizations. The technical advisory committee will be tasked with identifying our technical needs and issues in the area, compiling that information for our subcommittees, and all this will be really structured around those 6 livability principles that we touched on earlier. The other committee that we'll need to form is called the Regional Advisory Committee, and this will be largely composed of the towns and jurisdictions in the region, our state agencies, including DENR, folks like that, our big regional employers in the area, and out of this committee we'll have subcommittees which will again be focused around those livability principles. So once we have these committees formed, we move it into the next step, analyzing our existing conditions. We really need to do an inventory of all of the existing plans in the area that have to do with elements in the regional plan for sustainable development. We really need to focus on identifying any data gaps, also identifying any conflicting baseline assessment for the region, including a business as usual future development scenarios. Basically, if we continue at the rate that we're going on now, how are we going to look like in 10, 20 years? Is that where we want to go? Next step is engage the community. Develop and implement the outreach materials. We want to contract with a lot of community organizations to get the word out, get people involved in this effort. We're going to work with UNCW to develop and analyze a survey about the attitudes on sustainability in our region. And undertake a series of visioning and scenario planning workshops. And these will be, we'll hire a facilitator to help with this. We want to make these as accommodating as possible. So we're kind of thinking out of the box, and we want to offer transportation, child care, Spanish interpretation, sign language interpretation. We're going to have a program online where people can attend these meetings from their home. The point of this is to get as many people involved as we can. HUD really wants us to focus on engaging the populations of the region that are typically left out of the public planning process. So that is a huge component for us. The more input that we can receive, particularly from people that are normally left out, the better of a plan that we're going to create in the end. And also the better buy-in that we'll get. We get these community organizations involved and these other just individuals. It's going to be much more productive as far as a personal commitment to implementing this plan as we move forward. So the next step, getting towards the end of year 2, is to develop scenarios for the future of our region. These will be developed in collaboration with the consortium, the 2 committees, and the input that we receive from the public. So we'll develop some scenario alternatives for the region, and then identify which one is the best based on the input that we receive and the communication that we have throughout this process. So once we have identified that alternative, we'll start working on drafting this plan. Again, ongoing dialogue and collaboration is absolutely paramount to a good end result here. We want to achieve a consensus. We want everyone to be involved and comfortable with the end result of this. We don't want any conflicts or apprehensions about different organizations or different jurisdictions or counties buying into this, because it is a regional plan. We do need that regional buy-in in order to carry this plan out for the scenario alternative that we come up with. We will identify the barriers to implementing this plan, and in order to do that, we'll be evaluating all the existing plans in the region, and one of the things that we will create is a toolkit to overcome these barriers. For instance, if there's a policy that might conflict with what the Regional Plan for Sustainable Development recommends, the toolkit would recommend to revise that policy to be in concert with the plan. In order to track how we're doing, we're going to develop some tasks and performance metrics. The SAS Institute is donating some substantial software to us to help us out with that. I'm not sure what that is or how that's going to work, but I know that we have that coming for us to help with us. And then finally, once that draft plan is finalized, we will present that back to the public and get comment. Revise that plan based on any comment we receive if it's substantial, and then move on to adopting that plan. The adoption will consist of the consortium member boards first, taking it to our respective city councils, county boards, commissioners, getting them to endorse it, and then moving on to the different organizations that compose our committees and having them endorse it. And this endorsement would include a resolution, an agreement to incorporate this plan into future plans and policies, and also to align existing plans and regulations and programs with the spirit and intent of our regional plan for sustainable development. Once it's all said and done, start implementing this. Again, people that endorse, or the agencies that endorse this plan, will be expected to use it as a guide when they're creating or amending their existing plans, policies, regulations, and programs. We'll track our success through some software donated by SATS. The consortium is going to continue to meet beyond this project to discuss how we're doing. You know, if we need to change anything, or if we need to revisit some things, we can do that at that time. And then every 3 to 5 years, we'll produce basically a report card to see how we're doing, and how we've done in the past couple of years, things we need to change. So finally, what do we want to get out of all this? Kind of alluded to, we really want to align the plans, policies, programs, and regulations in our region as they relate to land use, housing, transportation, infrastructure, and economic development. We want to increase the housing and transportation options for our region. This will in turn lower costs for our residents, reduce vehicle miles traveled, which will reduce emissions. We want to have a healthier, happier, and more productive society. We hope to increase access to healthy foods and recreation opportunities, increase participation in the public planning process, and facilitate improvements to existing communities. A couple final outcomes that we hope to get: increase the region's resilience to hurricanes, flooding, coastal erosion, sea level rise, and other impacts of climate change. And then finally, increase the opportunity for economic development in the region. And one of the ways that we hope to do that is to increase the proportion of population prepared to participate in core economic growth sectors. I gotta say that went a little bit faster than I anticipated, so that concludes my presentation, and we will be happy to answer any questions.
So basically, in terms of our events being about advocacy and reform related, we do, if there are any issues or questions, especially with this being, we're kind of the guinea pig for this group because they haven't talked about this, they just got the grant a month ago. So any key things, they would love feedback, and if you guys have questions, this is a good time. So.